Right, okay. I think we are live. So, welcome, Ryno from Volpro.
Thank you.
So you are the, if I get this right, I'll remember, research manager for
Yes,
Volpro. But
yes, that's correct.
new in the hot seat, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So essentially, as I said to you before we came on, tell us a little bit about your role at Vulpro then, and sort of a bit about the background of Vulpro, what you know, and then yeah.
Okay. So starting with me, I actually came from academic background, from doing my PhD at the University of Pretoria. I'm completely different than Raptors, on a little small lock, running around in the Kalahari Desert. In the Northern Cape of South Africa. And yeah, so basically after my PhD, well, I'm still finalizing the last couple of chapters of my PhD, but I decided I need to get a job, and I went over and I actually managed to get this research manager position at Volpro in late February this year. So I'm quite new to this, and it's been quite a privilege to actually work with Volpro and actually learn all the things about large raptors. Even though I've handled large raptors with my ringing in the past, I really enjoyed it starting working with Volpro. And yes, Volpro is part of this organization that actually look at quite a huge variety of stuff. Volpro started in 2007 with the whole idea to actually to rehab all the birds that either get poisoned, and then also in electrocution or any threat that causes them to be grounded. Volpro started to go out and actually collect those birds and rehab them so that these birds can then be released back into the wild. And then Kerry and they took it further and started doing research, and actually with all the rehabilitation that they did, I think the total of rehabilitations done up to date, or they rescued 820, more than 820 birds in the last 13 years. And about 350 of them has been released back into the wild. And if you take those numbers, it's quite substantial. If these vultures, all the different species, mainly Cape and African whiteback, lose 350 vultures over the last decade or so, the population would be in quite a big problem. So Volpro is doing quite an important job of actually trying to get these birds back into the wild so they can breed, because of all the threats these birds actually experience. And then in 2011, Volpro started a breeding program, because some of these birds can't be released back into the wild because of broken wing, and it needs to be amputated. So they started a captive breeding program. It took a couple of years to actually establish it and actually to do or to release these birds back into the wild. But in 2015, they managed to start releasing approximately 10 individuals every year since 2015. We actually make a huge difference by allowing these birds that can't be released back into the wild to still contribute to the actual bigger population, and help maintaining the population numbers of Cape and African whiteback and hooded vultures, all the vultures in South Africa. And then from there, of course, everything is combined with research, and that's where I came into the picture to actually help with the research of Volpro and actually taking these data, because all the rehab birds, I think we had a total of 137 birds with tracking devices on. So we have a huge number of data that's available for tracking. Like, there's good work that we can do on the captive breeding program, research stuff that we can do, get better understanding, get more birds to actually be able to breed successfully in captivity and then release those birds back into the wild. We're part of a population monitoring for hooded vultures, African whitebacks, and Cape vultures in various colonies across South Africa, as well in Botswana for the African whiteback vultures. So yeah, that's basically in a nutshell. And then also with the rehabilitation, it takes a lot of work and also collaboration with vets. And now recently,
so Volpro is it's a non-government organisation, isn't it?
Yes. That's
so
correct.
you complete.
Hi, Jimmy. Jimmy.
Okay, right. As far as I am aware, we should now be live again on Facebook. Yes, we are. So don't worry about going back over everything you've just said. I'll leave the other video up so people can find out a bit about what you said in the first 10 minutes. I was before we got cut off, I was just gonna mention that Vulpro is an NGO, isn't it? So it's a non-government organization. So you're completely dependent on donations, funding, grants, things like that. So it's worth. I just wanted to make sure I point that out to people that you don't get any sort of form of government funding. Whereabouts is Volpro based in South Africa?
It's on the border of Northwest and Gauteng, close to Hartbeespoort. But Volpro has a satellite site in the Eastern Cape that's run by Kate Webster, that also collect birds in the Eastern Cape. And if they're not releasable, then those birds are sent up to Volpro, because we at Volpro, we just have a much more a bigger facility to actually facilitate these birds for long periods and use them in that captive breeding program.
Yeah, so obviously Kerry Walter is in charge of Volpro, and she started it. And so where it's based, Volpro as a whole, just describe. So it's a facility, isn't it? I know you mentioned you've got a breeding colony of Cape vultures, for instance, but you've got several other species there, haven't you? Bird of prey wise. Some that aren't native to Africa as well. I believe you've got a condor or two condors.
Yes, well. Two condors there.
But a large part of the work of just explain what the work is of Volpro at the actual facility then, because I know people can visit, can't they?
Yes, so people can come and visit Volpro, and we provide them with tours, and also we further that with like school tours. When they actually come, we educate them on the tour and show them around, because we have these on Volpro we have various enclosures with different, like we have lappet face, palm nuts, whitebacks, Cape vultures, black vulture, the condors that you mentioned. So we have a wide variety of actual vultures that are housed at Volpro. We have a restaurant on the facility as well, where the breeding, the wild colonies from the Magaliesberg area, they actually come and visit Volpro, so you can come and sit in the hive and actually enjoy the vultures actually feeding at the restaurant. We had marabou stalks the other day as well there, so it's quite a nice experience to actually come out and actually enjoy the time at Volpro. And yes.
Yeah. So just to cover on the restaurant's probably quite an interesting point for people, because obviously when you mention restaurant here in the UK, people are thinking about going out for dinner, or if they're talking about a facility like what Vulpro is, people are thinking of like at Chester Zoo, for instance, one of the big zoos in the UK, yes, restaurants for people to eat at. But obviously this is a vulture restaurant you're talking about, exactly. And these have been set up right across Africa as a safe feeding zone for, yes, vultures. So it's an area where the wild populations of vultures can come and feed. And obviously the carcasses that are there are completely clean of any poison. Exactly. So just I just wanted to clarify when people are thinking what a vulture restaurant is. That's what it is. So you've got a vulture restaurant on site at Volpro then?
Yes, we have one on site and then one close to so we have one at Nuit, which is one of the breeding colonies on the Magaliesberg area, yeah. And there is also a vulture restaurant because we in 2018, I think, it can be wrong, 2017, 2018, we established a soft release location for the captive bred birds, so that after the breeding season and actually housing them at Volpro, we take them to this site so that they are completely get habituated to the wild population, and they only see people once a week when we actually take food up for them. And enough food to last them for a week, with clean water, clean everything, so that they become wild. Otherwise, the problem comes if we release those birds, they end up in someone's garden and they're easy to catch because they're so tame to people. So there's also, and we also have 200, approximately 250 other restaurants across the country that's registered with Volpro, where we inspect that all the animals that they feed are clean from any poison and so forth, and actually being a safe area for them to actually get food on a regular basis as well. And we hope that this will also help with actually reducing the number of poison cases, and also help with the increase in their numbers.
Yeah, so obviously we talked about, when we had Andre on, both are from the EWT, we talked about poisoning, but a big part of what you do, if I'm not mistaken, following you on social media, for instance, and talking to Kerry, is the impact that power lines have on well, all birds of prey. It's not just vultures, but obviously things like I know a species that's close to you, Vulpro, is Cape vultures, and so a large part of your work is driving all over South Africa to collect injured vultures that have collided with power lines. Just explain a little bit about some of the work you have to do with that side of things.
Yes, so we work closely with Eskom as well with it. So if we, for example, we track these birds, like the birds that we have trackers on, we follow them daily and actually see that they move every day, because the thing is, as soon as they grounded or in a certain area for a couple of days, we would send out a team to actually investigate. And usually if they grounded, it's due to either a poisoning event or the electrocution, or either electrocution or a collision with power lines. And in that case, then we'll report this case to Eskom, and then we will follow up with them so that they will implement some mitigations to these power lines to reduce the threat. And hopefully one day we'll get to a time where all the power lines are safe to vultures and other large terrestrial birds that actually fly into these birds. And then on a regular basis, we were planning to do a couple of power line surveys during March, but with the lockdown, we weren't able to actually conduct them. But we then go out and actually walk along a power line, either a transmission line or distribution line, and actually record every single detail of that power line, and then either see if there is a collision with or leftovers of birds to say that there was a collision with the power line, and then that's also sent to Eskom, and then also put it into the national database of power line collisions and reporting it, and that will then be on a monthly basis be reported to all the funders and everyone involved into the project.
Yeah, so it's almost like essentially you're monitoring the situation, you're working with Eskom, which are the power supply, the utilities company, and then obviously the data, as you say, I presume you can work out hotspots, and I suppose to some extent, if you've got a Cape vulture breeding, because they're colony nesters, I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Cape vultures? Yes. And so if you've got power lines running close to a colony, or plans, I suppose, to put power infrastructure in, then it's great to hear that you're on the front line. And I think another thing I wanted to point out from our point of view, being British, I've been to Africa a couple of times, or South Africa a couple of times, and I think as someone who's British, we sometimes forget, because we're only a little island, Britain. We forget how vast South Africa is, because it's huge. I never forget, Ryno, talking to one of the guides we were out with, and they made a comment about going to the cinema and how they would have to drive 3 hours to go and watch a film that was only 2 hours long, whereas here I can drive 15 minutes down the road to the cinema. So the sort of the power lines, the areas that you're covering, are vast, aren't they? They're thousands of kilometers, not hundreds.
They're massive. They're stretching from the western parts of the Northern Cape all the way to the eastern parts of KZN, and that is huge. And we're talking about, like you mentioned, the hotspot. We're currently working on a manuscript to get published about identifying hotspot areas to where vultures are more possible to collide or to get electrocuted by these power lines, so that we can take it further and actually make sure that these power lines are then mitigated. So that will be, after the study, then we'll go and do additional surveys on that certain areas to actually ensure that Eskom actually went and actually do the stuff, but they're very good with when a case has been reported to actually try to implement mitigations and ensure that it's safe.
So essentially Eskom, they're being proactive rather than reactive. So it's fantastic. Now, obviously, you mentioned about how when you do get a bird, one of the values of Volpro is you've got these fantastic facilities to be able to rehabilitate them, and then those birds are fitted with a satellite tracker, aren't they? So that you can follow their movements, not just for obviously the power line instance, but just because from your point of view in research, it's really valuable data where these birds go, and so on. I know talking about the facilities, you're in the process of having a new hospital built, or had one built. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. So it was finished now in March. But we're still in the process of kitting it out, and there we require some donations to actually finalize all the equipment and actually set it up to be a proper hospital on site where we can do proper rehabilitation. Don't need to send these birds on a 60-kilometer trip to the vet at Onderstepoort. So that facility is now finished, It's just now kitting it out with the necessary equipment to actually be hands-on with that the hospital.
Because you've got, I mean, again, and that was mainly what I was getting at. If people are looking to make a donation, then supporting just something like that alone, the hospital is a wonderful thing. You've got volunteers right. We talk about how obviously big South Africa is, but again, from following you on social media, you've got volunteers right across Africa that are prepared to drive hundreds of kilometers to bring you vultures, and you probably are Volpro is the preeminent figure for vulture rehabilitation, I suppose, in Africa, in South Africa in many ways. So that's brilliant. Of course, some vultures can't be released, and but they still have a conservation value, and that's where the colony at Volpro, or the colonies, pairing up birds, comes into it. So just mention a little bit about the captive breeding side of things, if you would.
Yes, so I'm not sure exactly the numbers of how many captive bred individuals we have at this stage, but so we have this colony set up on Volpro as well, on that location, where these birds have an artificial cliff where then they can actually go and build there. We supply there, luckily with the volunteers that you mentioned, they bring nesting material every single day to Volpro, and we just put it in a cage, and they actually go and collect these things and build their own nest. And in the past, so for this year with the whole lockdown and the virus and funding and all those things, we're going to have a different approach to the whole captive breeding, because in the past they would lay the egg, and then we breed them in incubators until they hatch, and then we replace the original egg with a dummy egg, and then when they hatch, we put the chick back into the nest. But this year, with funding and electricity to run these incubators, we decided to actually this year just let them breed by themselves and actually see how it goes. And that also then provides a baseline for research, and actually to see where to select certain individuals and actually spend any energy into it, because some of the eggs in captive as in wild are infertile sometimes, and try to understand why and when these birds are or producing an infertile egg. Is it first year breeding, or is it second year breeding, and all those things. So it provides us with a lot of research questions that we can ask that can be applied to the wild population. And now we're in the process as well of establishing another breeding colony close to Bronkhorstspruit, which is to the east of Gauteng. So we're trying to split the risk as well of any diseases, because the problem is if there's a disease coming in, it will destroy the whole population that we have. So with this whole process, we're trying to spread out the vultures across it, otherwise to ensure that these birds aren't in any threat of diseases or anything in the future. And hopefully they can also establish as their own breeding colony in the Bronkhorstspruit area in their own enclosure. So there's a lot happening in Volpro, and it's growing, especially the last couple of years. Volpro has expanded drastically, and we can see that with the numbers in certain areas, Volpro is actually making a huge difference in reducing the actual decline in this population, like in the Magaliesburg area, as we are more hands-on in that particular area, where the other colonies, we still see the declines, and we're trying to figure out with population monitoring what's going on there. But that captive breeding program is quite an interesting and important aspect of Volpro, and also be able to reintroduce these birds. And we had a captive bred individual with a tracker on that went all the way into Namibia, down into the Northern Cape of South Africa, and came back to the Magaliesburg area.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic.
So
I was just going to say, because it essentially it is working. You're taking what would be an injured bird, that's still got a value, hasn't it? So these birds these injured birds, but birds that might have a wing missing, or so certainly can't go back to the wild. They are breeding, aren't they, in your colonies, and birds are being released, which is what I absolutely love. I love the fact that this is it's tried and tested, and it is working. Volpro are breeding from rehab birds and releasing them back into the wild, and then, as you say, learning all this wonderful information about I'm assuming this bird that travelled to Namibia, is that a first year? That's his first year.
Yes, that was the first year. Yeah, there was one that was released in 2018. So the 2019 fledglings, that the ones that hatched in October last year, unfortunately we wanted to release them, but we had to bring them back due to the lockdown and everything. So they will only be released later this year, as soon as the lockdown is over, so that we can actually go and put them in the soft release enclosure as well. So that was definitely, that was a first year individual that actually moved that huge distances. And we have one birds moving up to Lake Kariba, Lake Kariba, sorry, in Zimbabwe, and then also it's on its way moving back through Botswana. We had birds moving to Delta in Botswana as well. So these birds fly in huge areas and cover huge distances every single day, and that's why it's probably so difficult to understand what is actually causing these declines in their population numbers. And there's so many threats that they can encounter from here all the way to Namibia. So yeah, with this tracking data, we can then try to understand exactly what is causing these declines of first years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant stuff. And I suppose from your point of view, as someone who's coming into this as a research scientist, you're probably in your absolute element with it as well. For how are you? Obviously, you said to me, I don't think we recorded it at the start. You said to me about, obviously, your no, I think you maybe did. Your PhD was on larks. How are you finding working with some big proper birds then? No offense to the larks, but I like me raptors. So how are you finding working with the raptors and studying them and the vultures?
It's coming from working with small birds. So my PhD was more on a physiological part, and not it's also endangered birds, so it's also worth conservation, but we had a more physiological approach and what climate change, the impact on climate change on these small larks are. So coming from that, there's a lot of stuff that I can actually apply to vultures, and vultures is such, I think it's easier to work with bigger birds than smaller birds. But yeah, so I actually had a couple of we worked on owls as well during my PhD as a separate project. So I had some experience with working with bigger raptors. But yeah, I'm really enjoying my work at Volpro, even though it's only a month and a half into it. I'm really enjoying it and actually learning a lot from conservation point, coming out of a solid academia course. So I'm actually enjoying it, and actually where the actual academia can be applied to actually protect a certain species and ensure that our kids one day can see all these important birds and pretty birds that we have the privilege to see.
Well, yeah, and as you know, the critically important as well. We bang on about it a lot with Raptor Aid, and that's why we love organisations like Volpro, because these birds, are so critically important. We said it with Andre, from whether you're in Britain or wherever you are in the world, vultures make a difference, irrespective of what you think. Just mentioning the youngsters then, what's one of the questions I mentioned this to you I think before we started, is I often get asked by young academics, so people, you know, that were just starting a graduate degree. Even people not so much doing that, you know, people doing high school work. What opportunities do Volpro offer? Opportunities for people to come out and do work experience? Then you mentioned volunteers.
Yes, no. So Volpro allows anyone to actually come and help. Like we have like you mentioned previously as well, and we said that Volpro has a huge volunteer group in South Africa as well as internationally, where these a lot of people help with getting these birds at certain locations that we don't have to drive after every single one. So for a young person to get involved, yes, okay, unfortunately they can't drive always to go and collect stuff. But for someone that wants to get involved, they must just contact Volpro. We have a lot of opportunities where they can come either learn the research part or spend a day on a weekend, or even like during holidays where they can come and spend a day or two at Volpro and actually help with feeding these birds and actually interacting with these birds. It's such a lacquer thing or enjoyable thing to actually sit and actually watch these birds and how they behave. Even though they're in captivity or in enclosures, they still behave, and you can see certain behavioral trends that you can pick up. And it's such a privilege to actually be up and close with these birds and work with them hand on hand. So for someone coming from as a student or trying to get to learn more about the nature and birds or whatever, they must surely contact Volpro. There's more than enough opportunities to come and help us there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. Kind of seems like the perfect pack. I wish when I was younger I'd come across someone like Vulpro, because you've got the research side of things, so you can just what we've just discussed. You know, there's obviously loads of opportunity to assist and learn about that. You've got the animal husbandry side of things as well, so the day-to-day running of the centre. And yeah, I always point out to people that's not all glamorous, not just, you know, there's a lot of hard graft involved in that. I come from a background of working with captive birds of prey. And then going on from that, you know, the field work that you do as well further afield, it's it couldn't be any better. So I'll make sure I put a link up to Volpro anyway, with this before I post this online. One other question. I won't keep you too long then, because one other question. Not that you've got to go anywhere, because your lockdown's just been extended, and I think ours is due to be extended today, this afternoon. So someone's asked, have you got any experience with tawny eagles in the wild?
Well, I personally don't have experience with tawny eagles, but as far as I have it, Volpro and they had tawny eagles as in rehab. I'm not sure exactly what happened to them, and I'm pretty sure they got released. But we don't have any. Well, personally, I don't have experience in my month and a half that I was with Volpro now with tawny eagles. We had a Rogues eagle in that we're trying to get a mate for, so that we can also start a breeding program for that with Rogues eagles. And then we had a Warburgs, but he was unfortunately so very injured, and he didn't make it. But we don't have experience, or I don't have experience with tawny.
No, fair. No, that's all right. Don't worry. I'll finish on a question. What's your? Because I absolutely love Africa. I think it's such an amazing to spend time there is a real privilege. Is it? You know, for someone who's into their wildlife and their birds of prey, especially. Give us your. Have you been lucky enough to spend a lot of time out in the bush? You obviously have doing your PhD and stuff like that. Have you got any memorable stories to whet people's appetites for the African bush? Anything exciting's ever happened?
Jimmy, I lost you there. So can you maybe just repeat the question?
Oh, I was just saying how much I love my time that I've spent in Africa, and I was asking whether, with your experience in the bush, doing your PhD and your studies, whether you've got any memorable stories. What it doesn't have to relate to birds of prey. It could be, elephants, rhinos, or anything like that.
Sure. A story that would stick out. I'm not sure exactly. There's no story because there's so many that, like all the places I've seen and actually the things I experience from with my honors work in the Drakensberg, spending months there, climbing up the mountains, seeing all the wildlife around you as you actually doing some research on a small bird in that area, all the way to experiencing aardvarks, aardwolves, polecats, everything in the Bushman land in the northern parts of Northern Cape. There's nothing that I can say that sticks out. Spending every year at least 2 weeks in Kruger National Park. There's just too many stories that there's no particular one that stands out to me that I can say that can highlight it. Just...
No, well, I mean, I should know better, because I asked Andre this question as well, and he said, how can I answer that? As he spent years in the field, exactly. And he said, oh, I can't really answer that. I was hoping you were going to tell me like some really cool story about, you got called a rhino, but your name's Ryno because I don't know, you're a rhino whisperer or something. But obviously that.
No, they called me that on at high school, so
it might be to do with your rugby days then, I don't know. Brilliant. Right, well, that's it. I mean, it's been brilliant. I can't thank you enough for coming on, and I'm glad we got you back after the first that we got cut off. I wish you every luck, and hopefully I will eventually make it out to Volpro. I keep saying to Kerry that I'll come out and
that'd be nice.
Help a little bit. So it'd be lovely to come out and see firsthand the work you're doing out there. But right, Ryno, thank you very much for taking the time. I'll end the stream now, and yeah, thank you very much everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it.